In August 1944, a great tank battle was fought on these fields. One of the men killed in the action was Germany's highest-scoring panzer ace. Michael Wittmann was known as the Black Baron. He had killed 138 tanks, and he was a hero of the Third Reich. Like the death of the Red Baron in the First World War, there's been some controversy over who killed Michael Wittmann. We have come back to this battlefield in Normandy to re-examine the evidence and determine who killed Michael Wittmann. This is where the remains of Michael Wittmann were found in 1983. And of course, a lot of groups have claimed that they killed Michael Wittmann. The British claim that they have done it.
Quite frankly, I'm quite pleased that I got rid of him.
There's rumors that a Typhoon aircraft came in and killed him.
It was found with the turret blown off. Only a Typhoon could have done that.
And there's some that say the Canadians got him.
I believe the Sherbrooks did knock out Michael Wittmann.
To resolve the mystery of who killed Michael Wittmann, we're going to have to look at the battlefield and analyze it. We're going to have to look at the armor of both sides, and we're going to look at the men who fought in the battles in Normandy. This is the men of the Sherbrooks, the Northamptonshire Yeomanry, and of course the German Panzer Corps. And the most famous is Michael Wittmann, Germany's top panzer ace.
Michael Wittmann is born in 1914 and grows up a farm boy with ambition of greater things. At 19, he joins the military and quickly makes his way up through the ranks. By the war's outbreak in 1939, he is serving in the Führer's own elite guard, the Leibstandard Adolf Hitler of the Waffen-SS. Commanding a self-propelled gun, he quickly distinguishes himself on the battlefield, earning a reputation as a fearless leader. But this is only the beginning for Michael Wittmann. In the spring of 1943, he is given command of one of Germany's most fearsome weapons, the Tiger tank. Assigned to the Eastern Front, Wittmann's bold tactics claim an impressive 56 tanks and artillery pieces in just over 6 months. By the end of January 1944, his overall tally soars to an amazing 100 kills. His exploits become headline news throughout Germany. Dubbed the Black Baron by both friend and foe, in February, Wittmann is decorated by Hitler himself. But for all the accolades, his greatest victory still lies ahead, battling the Allied invasion force on the Western Front. June 6, 1944, the Allies launch their invasion of Normandy. The German High Command quickly orders 4 divisions forward to reinforce the Normandy front, including the 2nd Company of the 101st SS Panzer Battalion, now commanded by Michael Wittmann. On June 13th, as a column of British armor rolls in to occupy the village of Villers-Bocage, the Black Baron pulls up just outside town.
I'm with Daniel Taylor, who's an expert on the Battle of Villers-Bocage, and he's going to explain what happened on June 13th, 1944. So what was happening here with Wittmann's Tigers?
Well, they'd found themselves in this little lane. They'd been advancing from Belgium for about 5 or 6 days. The unit was strung out across hundreds of miles. They'd managed to get here with 5 tanks. The place presents pretty good cover.
So they're encamped along this lane?
Yeah, dispersed along it, yes.
So what happens in the morning?
Well, in the morning, Wittmann's roused by the sound of tanks coming along the road.
So they're literally, what, 200 yards away?
About that. He'd have seen as the turrets went along that line.
Right up on top of here?
Up there, yes.
Okay, so now Wittmann, what's his reaction to this?
Well, he's got very few options left open to him. There's probably an argument about what he should have done, but what he decided to do was attack.
Ich hatte keine Zeit, meine Kompanie aufzustellen. Ich musste schnell handeln. Ich fuhr los mit nur einem Panzer bis zur Säule und überraschte die Engländer genauso viel, wie sie mich überrascht haben.
Wittmann's come barreling across the field. First shot, takes out a Firefly.
He's hitting them from, what, 50 yards?
If that, yes. Point blank range.
So he's not going to miss.
The rest of his unit is to try to engage A squadron up on the top of the hill you can see there. And he's come across the field and he runs into a column of transport. They all start bursting into flame.
So now he's going to drive into town and he's leaving dead and burnt out vehicles behind him. So the guys in the village, do they know what's going to hit them?
Absolutely not, no. It's going to be a big, rude surprise to them any second now. So Wittmann's come down, he's run into these 4 Cromwell tanks, which you think might have a bit of a chance against him. He managed to get a couple of shots off at the Tiger before he's taken out. They just bounce off.
So they're bouncing off at, what, 50 yards,
50 yards, no distance at all. The following Cromwell has pulled behind this wall and pulled into the courtyard of that building.
Right.
That's commanded by Captain Dias.
I suddenly saw this Tiger tank shooting down the main street. I got the driver to reverse our tank into a farmyard. And in the next moment, to my astonishment, with no gunner in our gunner seat, the Tiger went right in front of me.
Unfortunately for the Cromwell, the gunners just got out to have a pee. And so there's no way that he can fire. With the
So he's missed a
broadside-
glorious chance.
Glorious chance. The Tiger's passing side on right in front of him. No way of firing. The Tiger then passes on, turns into the high street. Another target-rich environment.
Wittmann's rampage claims a total of 12 tanks and 15 other vehicles, all in a little under 10 minutes. Deciding not to push his luck any further, he retreats back through the village.
So how many tanks and soft-skin vehicles did he get credited for this attack?
Well, the Germans credited him with an entire regiment.
In diesem Ort prallten die Panzer zusammen. In den engen Straßen wurde eine stärkere amerikanische Panzereinheit gestellt und zusammengeschossen. Seit dem ersten Tag der Invasion haben die Angloamerikaner rund 1000 schwere und schwerste Panzer verloren.
Wittmann's attack on the British is a huge gamble that pays off. With it, he single-handedly breaks the Allies' momentum and stalls their advance out of Normandy. For his actions at Villers-Bocage, the Black Baron is once again decorated by Adolf Hitler. The ambitious farm boy has now become a living legend. But Wittmann's luck is running out. In less than 2 months, the Third Reich's mighty Black Baron will be dead, leaving behind an enduring mystery surrounding his death. June 13th, 1944. Panzer Commander Michael Wittmann makes military history with a daring solo attack on a British armored column at the Norman village of Villers-Bocage. His actions that day stall the Allied advance on the strategic town of Caen, and it takes nearly 2 more months of bloody combat in the surrounding area to finally drive the Germans out.
We're on the road south of Caen, going to the village of Sintho, the place of Michael Wittmann's final battle. Throughout July 1944, the Allies launched a number of offensives at Caen, finally capturing it and pushing into the fields to the south, with some of the most severe fighting of the Normandy campaign. Throughout July, the Allies advanced a very short distance with tremendous casualties. No one suffered worse than the tankers, and in 1 month of battle, more than 400 Allied tanks were destroyed.
One of the first things we saw in Normandy was a knocked-out Sherman tank. And it had gone up in flames, as Shermans were infamous for exploding, going into a sheet of flame 20 or 30 feet high. The tank that we saw still had 2 or 3 of the crew sitting inside, but no longer recognizable as human beings.
The Germans used to call us Tommy cookers because they burnt so easily. I became a fatalist overnight. And I'm glad I did, because I think that's the only way you could survive.
And one, at that point, realized that we were in tremendous danger, because this was something that Germans could obviously do with their great guns.
They'd go in one side and out the other, sort of thing, of some of our tanks. But the main thing was that they could knock out our tanks at a safe distance.
And we had not been informed in any way that this is the fate that waited us just up the road. In your mind, every German tank was a Tiger, because the Tiger was the terror, and if it was a Tiger, then you had to fight for your life.
Each one of us, you know, you had the jitters every time you saw the buggers, because the gun was so much superior.
Technically, the range needed to knock out a Tiger by a 75 was about 2 or 3 inches. The shots from 75 were bouncing off like ping pong balls. One thing we had in advantage was what we called a Firefly. It was still the normal Sherman, but the 75mm gun, which was about 6-pounder, had been replaced by a 17-pounder. For the first time, we realized we now had a tank which was equal to the Tiger, and we were able to believe it.
August 7th, 1944, more than 25,000 British and Canadian troops assemble for Operation Totalize, a major offensive devised to crack the German defensive lines south of Caen. Unlike previous operations, Totalize is planned as a night assault to confuse the Germans and limit their response. It begins at midnight, August 8th. The initial attack is a success, and in less than 4 hours, the Allies break through the German lines and begin advancing south. Progress in the dark is slow for some units, while others, like the Northamptonshire Yeomanry and the Sherbrooke Fusiliers, proceed quickly to their objectives. Isolated from the main force, they dig in for the inevitable German counterattack. And so it is, in the early hours of August 8th, the stage is set for the Allies' final confrontation with the Black Baron.
The Northamptonshire Yeomanry were one of 2 units involved in the killing of Michael Wittmann. And to recreate what happened to Wittmann, we have to find out exactly where they were. Now, we know that in 1944, they hid in the orchard south of St. Agnan. But in 60 years, a lot of things have changed. For example, the orchards aren't there anymore, so we're going to have to try to determine where they were. And this is also true of the Sherbrooke's position, and it's going to be a little challenging to try to find out exactly where everybody was. Now we're on a small country road south of St. Agnan. And by 8 a.m., the yeomanry were on their objective, which was the village. They had discharged their infantry. They moved south into these woods, and they built defensive positions in case there was a German counterattack.
Today there's no orchards and very little woods, but this whole area was wooded in 1944. And from here they got a commanding view of the area to the south and to the west. You can see the Route Nationale over here, and the Germans were further south. But as the yeomanry were digging in, the Canadians were also advancing west of the Route Nationale. So what we're going to do is we're going to go by the Canadian cemetery, and just a little bit north of it is Gumisnel, which is a very, very small hamlet. And this is where the Sherbrooke set up. We know it was in a stone wall around an old chateau. Here's, looks like our wall. So this is our first entrance into Gumisnel. So we'll go right into the middle of the hamlet, and we'll ask where this chateau was. So this is the eastern outskirts of the hamlet of Gumisnel, and we're right on the Route Nationale. You can see the cars coming by. They're routing our battlefield. So what I'm looking for is an old wall that belonged to an old chateau. And there's a lot of old stuff around here. Pardonnez-moi, monsieur. Bonjour, monsieur, ça va? Ça va. Et je cherche pour le place pour le vieux château et le vieux mur.
Oui, voilà. Tout de suite, on est ici.
Oui.
Là, la maison. Et le vieux château, ici.
OK.
Et un mur tout autour, comme ça. Le château, il a brûlé avec les Anglais. Mais ce n'était pas l'aviation, ni les chars, ni le... il a brûlé.
C'est un accident.
Accident bête, oui. Accident... beaucoup...
Merci, monsieur.
Voilà.
So what's happened is the old chateau was just north of here, and that the wall came around. It was a huge wall that went up to this area around about 30 meters down that way, then down to the main road. Then at the end of the war, the chateau burnt down, and apparently a bunch of English soldiers got drunk and the thing caught fire. So this is the correct wall. I want to see if I can get inside there to see exactly what the Sherbrooks could see on the day of the battle. When I got through here, so that certainly looks like the wall we're looking for. If you look over here, you can actually see the work of the Sherbrooks. You can see the holes over there. Those are Sherman-sized holes. And that's where they would have broken through. You can also see where they knocked down the wall to firing height. And of course, this is where they set up some of their defensive positions. It gave them an incredible field of fire, and if the Germans wanted to attack from Sinto north, the Sherbrooks had them. So, based on the description, the Sherbrooks were hiding behind here. But what's really exceptional about this is that they were so well hidden that no one even knew they were here. And even the histories of the war afterwards don't mention anything about the Sherbrooks being here. Walters had picked such a superb position that no one was ever going to find him. But what he didn't know was that about a mile away to the south at the village of Sintho, the SS are having their little conference, their ops group, and they're planning a counterattack. And one of the men that's going to be in the counterattack is Michael Wittmann.
For the Germans, the situation is critical. Operation Total Eyes has broken their defensive line, decimating an entire division in the process. Now it threatens to cut off all remaining German units in Normandy. They have no choice but to strike back without delay to halt the Allied advance. Kurt Meyer, commanding the 12th SS Division, is ordered to launch a counterattack near the Route Nationale. Faced with overwhelming odds, Meyer calls upon the one man capable of turning the tide, the Black Baron.
in the northern end of the village of Syntho, and on August 8, 1944, it was where the Germans made their plans to do something about the breakthrough of Total Eyes. So right in this area, Kurt Meyer met with Michael Wittmann and other officers to discuss what measures were going to be taken for the counterattack. Their main concern was a series of Canadian tanks back over the ridge. He saw them massing. He knew they were going to have a large offensive coming very quickly. So he ordered Wittmann to take his Tigers as well as some other tanks and some SP guns to come and hit the Canadians. Sort of like what he did at Villers-Bocage. Get out there quick and try to put them in disarray and buy some time for the Germans. So at 11:30, he shook hands with Meyer and he went to his Tigers. At 12:30, they had launched their attack. Called for 5 tanks to come across this field and 2 to go on the other side of the Route Nationale. Their objective was to get over the hill and hit the Canadian tanks that were massing there for the second phase of Operation Total Eyes. It takes them about 10 minutes to get into this area, and bang, the first Tiger gets hit. In the meantime, Wittmann is over by the Route Nationale. He must have seen this because his radio communication goes,
Achtung! Achtung! Wag von rechts! Wag von rechts!
The second tank goes up. It's Brood, completely up in the air. And the third tank is disabled because they've hit the wheels of the track and it's trying to get out. And it's retreating. In fact, it goes backwards across this field, and bang, it goes up. So in a few minutes, the field is all burning wreckage. The men are climbing out of the turrets. They're bringing their wounded. They're trying to get out of here before they're shot down. And as they go by, they see Tiger number 007, and it's not moving, and its turret is askew to the east.
In the aftermath, no one is sure exactly what has become of the Black Baron. He simply declared missing in action. At the time, the only clues to his fate were a few scattered reports from surviving German tankers.
When I looked out to the left, I saw that Michael's tank wasn't moving. The turret was displaced to the right and tilted down to the front somewhat. When I got to within about 250 to 300 meters, as the flames suddenly shoot from the tank, and the turret fly off and fall to the ground.
These accounts would remain unsubstantiated for decades, until a photo of the battlefield taken by a French farmer in 1945 confirmed at least some of the details surrounding the destruction of Tiger 007. Since then, more and more evidence has been surfacing in the field near Gosmenil.
C'est votre collection?
Voilà, c'est la collection.
Les pièces par le champ de bataille.
Beaucoup de choses ramassées par mon père, oui.
Non, vous trouvez toutes les pièces et votre père
Oui.
Trouvé à quelle place? Dans le champ?
Oui.
Ouais.
Là où on a trouvé les corps, oui.
Ouais, et toute la région aussi? C'est
Oh,
pour les autres pièces?
aussi, mais voilà, je peux vous dire, certifié que celui-ci vient de
Sur le champ de bataille.
007, oui, voilà.
Oh, bon.
C'est pas le plus beau, il est abîmé, mais...
So this is remarkable to actually touch the pieces of our investigation. This is the real thing.
La réglophone,
Pour la gauche.
voilà, j'ai plus besoin du micro.
Ah, c'est
Oui.
This
Faut
is
l'essayer.
they would talk through this part. So they talk to their throat and it would go out. It's quite unique to the Germans.
Il est probable qu'ils viennent du type de Wittmann.
Oui, je pense.
C'est cette pièce.
Oh, oui, that's
Oui.
from Wittmann's Tiger. Wow. Look at that. Ooh. This is an 88 armored piercing shell. So this is where the charge is, and they load it in the gun. Go
Oui, oui, oui.
avec le feu. That's why the tiger was deadly.
Cette pièce aussi, c'est une trappe qui était dans le fond de la tourelle.
Oui. C'est le plancher de la tourelle.
C'est le plancher, une partie du plancher de la tourelle, oui.
Oui. Whitman, il a marché là.
Oui.
Bien sûr.
Oui, oui.
Pour la dernière fois aussi.
La dernière fois, oui. Et même
So.
sa femme a pleuré quand elle a vu cette pièce.
Oui, c'est ça. Par la photo, je pense.
Voilà.
C'est
C'est ce qui, voilà, qui comble le vide du cercle là.
Puis la grande explosion, fait comme ça.
Oui.
Et les pouces. C'est fantastique. Et qu'est-ce que c'est ici?
Ceci, oui, c'est une tourelle que j'ai fait le même jour que les deux cercles de la tourelle.
So this is a rocket fired from a typhoon that was found at a similar time as they dug up these pieces from the tiger. This gives us another dimension of who could possibly have killed Michael Wittmann.
These relics from Tiger 007 provide the first pieces of tangible evidence, linking battlefield accounts with a photo of Wittmann's wrecked tank in the field near Gosmania. But they still have yet to reveal what became of the Black Baron himself, and more importantly, who it was that fired the fatal shot. To find answers, Norm Christie must reconstruct the battlefield, first by pinpointing the precise location where Wittmann's tank was destroyed.
So we're on the battlefield of August 8, 1944, right beside the route nationale. Michel, qu'est-ce que vous trouvez en 83 ici?
Nous, beaucoup plus, ici 70 mètres, environ 60 mètres peut-être. Nous sommes vraiment certainement sur l'endroit où les 5 hommes étaient.
Avec l'insigne de SS ou...
Oui, oui, sur le Wittmann, oui, il y avait la veste encore,
Okay.
en cuir.
So what Michel has told us is that they found a few remains just below the surface here. First some on top, a few fragments of bones, and then they called the German war graves in and they started to dig, and they dug down and found more remains. They found Panzer tanker uniforms, identity discs, a pistol that belonged to Michael Wittmann found here. So they came to the conclusion that the remains found here were the collective remains of Tiger 007, which was Wittmann's tank for the attack on August 8th. So now we know out of the 4 Tigers that were destroyed on this field, that the one here belonged to Michael Wittmann.
But the question remains as to who fired the fatal shot. Having established the positions of the Allied units, Norm will attempt to resolve whether it was the Yeomanry or the Sherbrooks that killed the Black Baron.
Here we have the positions of the Sherbrooks. We know that they were located just behind the chateau. And of course, we know that the Yeomanry were over there at St. Etienne. So we have that position and this position, which was the pinchers that caught the Tiger attack. So now, using some aerial photographs taken in 1944, we can actually piece together the history of what happened to Michael Wittmann.
On August 8, 1944, Germany's greatest tank commander, Michael Wittmann, was killed in this field. So far, Norm Christie has pinpointed the positions of the British and Canadian forces, along with the final location of Wittmann's tank. Now, using aerial reconnaissance photos from 1944, he will determine once and for all who killed the Black Baron.
I'm with Jan Juo, and he's an expert on the battlefield here near Sintho, and he's going to help us put together the mystery of Michael Wittmann. Let's look at what we got. This is the original photograph. So this shows how it was before. Now, this area has changed quite a lot, hasn't it?
Yes, yes, in large parts, yeah.
But we do have the fields where the 4 Tigers were.
Yeah.
We're okay there. That's where Wittmann's remains were found.
Yeah,
and
closest
that's
to the road.
Yeah, and that's where Sturge's photograph of 007 was taken
That's
in
correct.
1945. So the other part is where the yeomanry were. Now, what's changed in this area?
Particularly the orchards there, to the right of Wittmann's group.
Right.
Most of them have gone, disappeared completely.
So we don't know exactly where they were, but we can do it within 50 yards.
Oh, yes, I should think so.
So the next piece is, of course, the Sherbrooks. Now, that chateau and the wall, a lot of that's all gone now, right? The Sherbrooks are going to be the challenge because we also don't know which Sherbrooke took the shots. So let's go set it up and try to recreate this battle that really took place in about, what, 10, 12 minutes?
Oh, yeah, at most.
Let's go get the surveyor and find out what really happened.
Okay.
So this is the position where 007 was knocked out. This was Wittmann's tank, and this is where we're going to start our investigation. So we're going to analyze the field from really a line of sight from the various positions to see what they could actually see. Right. And then we're going to use surveying and GPS to do the rest, to get our distances. So we can ask Vincent to set this as our original point 0, and then we'll go out and find the locations of the other tigers over here. So we'll head out and let's do the one that was due east first.
Right.
Using the aerial photographs from 1944, Norm plots the field positions of the 4 wrecked tigers. The yeomanry claims that their gunner, Joe Atkins, took out Wittmann along with 2 others, a remarkable feat, to say the least. Norm is returning to the yeomanry's position south of Saint-Agnan to examine the battlefield from there to test the validity of the British claim.
So let's look at it. So we got Syntho over here, Misnel, okay, and we've got the yeomanry over here all set up, nicely dug in. So now they're ready for any counterattack should there be one. And of course, the Germans usually did very quickly.
We were, by midday, aware that the Germans had got to come. They couldn't leave us there any longer. There were 4 tigers, which came down on what would have been our side of the main road.
I saw these 3 tigers come across in front of us, about 1,200 yards away. Our tank commander told us to wait till they get to about 800 yards. I was now starting to get a bit itchy. The tank commander said, advance driver, and we pull out of cover. As we're pulling out of cover, he says, target the rear tiger. Can't see very much. You're looking through a periscope that big. At 800 yards, I mean, they're only that. They're tiny, you know. I fired. As we were reversing back into cover, I'd look round at the second tank. I was probably more frightened, but I was sort of thinking, get the bastards before they get me. I fired 1 shot at the second tank in line. He immediately blew up. The third one definitely was milling around looking for cover. As soon as I was ready to fire, I fired.
The yeomanry are here. They claim there's 3 tigers coming up, and they hit all 3 of them. So what's the danger area for a Firefly? How far can they shoot effectively?
Effectively, they would shoot at 800 meters, I would say. They could shoot at as far as 1,200 meters. But from here, that would be a very, very lucky shot.
Right.
I think we're looking at Wittmann's tiger there.
Right.
Was about 1 kilometer away.
So let's ask Vincent. Can you give me the third one?
767 meters.
And the second one we did?
754 meters.
Okay, 754. So that's this one. That's that one there. 754. How far to tank 1?
775.
775. So that's within 800. That's a good
right.
distance
Yes.
for a Firefly. Now, how far is the Wittmann one?
967.
967. So it's almost a kilometer. So 1,100 yards, which was at the very top of the range for the gun.
There are several things to consider. These 3 tigers here in the line are the closest to this place here where Northamptonshire Yeomanry was located. So it would make sense for them to have taken them out first anyway, because they are within 800 meters range.
So from here, you would see those 3 tigers very clearly on the horizon as they came across. But Wittmann is over the rise down towards that white building over there, Gulmasnell. You know, maybe a lucky shot would go through. That'd be a very skilled shot. But that would mean they got 4 tigers.
Yeah.
So that doesn't fit with the belief of what the yeomanry got that day. You can see why the 3 tigers would be sitting ducks, but the 4th one would be quite a challenge.
Norm Christie's investigation into who killed the Black Baron has pinpointed the positions of all the Tiger tanks destroyed near Saint-Tho on August 8, 1944. And his analysis of the British yeomanry's position south of Saint-Denis has brought their claim into question. He's now traveling to Gosminium to locate the position of the Canadian tanks and survey the battlefield from their perspective to determine whether they could have fired the kill shot.
So, these are the grounds of the old chateau, right?
Yes.
Now, the wall that surrounded it, most of the northern part is gone, but the southern part is still there. We found that the other day. So we know that the Sherbrooks came into this area. Now, your aerial photograph shows that they made holes in some of the walls that were on the Route Nationale, which of course is right here.
There's about 2 big holes we can see in this wall. One would be right in front of us, back here, and the other one would be a bit further to the left, on that side.
We came here earlier to try to find out or look for proof that the Sherbrooks were here. And we found small marks, but we didn't realize at the time how much of the wall was missing. And specifically, that there were breaks in the walls facing east towards where the Tigers would have advanced.
There was a couple right on the road, and it was from that general area that the first German tanks came out from Saint-Tho. Right away, I can remember the wireless net becoming active. I can see them, there's some tanks coming. But with my eyes, I could see the tank closest to the road, about 200 yards, I guess. I didn't fire at him. Other people from my squadron were firing at it now. I don't recall the actual tank blowing up by somebody firing at him. I can remember a tremendous explosion and seeing the turret hit the ground.
Are you surprised to see how close we are to Wittmann's tank?
Yes, I am indeed, yeah. Because even when you look at the aerial photograph, it doesn't seem so close. And when you're actually standing in the field, looking over from this side to where Wittmann's tank was destroyed, certainly looks very close indeed.
So let's ask Vincent exactly how far we are from Wittmann's tank. So Vincent, can you give me a distance to Tiger number 1, Wittmann's?
143 meters.
143 meters. That's incredibly close. So we have this situation. We know where his tank was, just over here. So we have the Sherbrooks positions here, and they're shooting in that direction towards Wittmann's tank. Now you have a schematic of it.
I showed a drawing of a Tiger, and Serge was actually able to draw the precise area where he observed a big impact, which was located on the left forward cooling grid.
So this is left rear of Wittmann's tank. So
That's right.
your trajectory would be very low here?
Yes, it would.
Because you're so close.
Mhm.
So it's most likely then that would come from this position.
Yes.
And then it went in, and gradually it ignited the fuel and the ammunition, and the turret blew off. That's amazing. I'm surprised we're this close. I thought we'd be around 500 meters, and now we're 150. So really, it almost has to be the Canadians. Can you think of any alternative?
Well, Monsieur Varin, who took the photograph that we see here, he's actually suggested that it could have been a Typhoon rocket because he photographed a non-exploded Typhoon rocket that was lying nearby the tank. The reason I would doubt it is a Typhoon rocket is that A, they were ripple fire and weren't very accurate. It would be very difficult to hit a tank. The second thing is that the Typhoon rocket has several pounds worth of explosive. And if the rocket hit the Tiger, the rear of the Tiger would be blown apart.
Right.
So you wouldn't be able to see the hull in one piece.
So there's no evidence of really burning in this.
No.
There's just no proof that it happened.
It's unlikely.
So we're left with really one thing here.
The Canadian.
Sherbrooke's had to do it.
Yes.
Having examined the battlefield from the German, British, and Canadian positions, it's now possible for the first time to reconstruct the Battle of Saint-Thô and accurately recreate the attack that killed German Panzer ace Michael Wittmann. It is now clear that Joe Ekins, from his position near Saint-Aignan, did destroy 3 Tigers. But it's difficult to believe Ekins could have fired the shot that killed Wittmann, especially in the face of strong evidence that indicates that the fatal shot came from the direction of the Canadian tanks at Gosmenil. A position only 143 meters from the Black Baron's Tiger. Following the Battle of Saint-Thô, the Allies pushed further south, continuing their advance against the remaining German units defending Normandy. In just 80 days, they completely encircled the retreating German army. The Battle of Normandy is all but over. In all, 100,000 men lose their lives, including 50,000 German soldiers.
This is La Cam German Cemetery in Normandy, and it's the largest German cemetery in Normandy, and it contains 21,000 graves, including 2 of the Tiger commanders killed August 8, 1944. This is Willie Irion. He was the commander of one of the Tigers knocked out going across the field, and you can see it's a collective grave with some of his crew members here. These are always just partial remains because of the fire inside the tank, as they say, brewed up, and there'd be very little after the battle to even bury. One tanker told me the story of burying his crew, and they buried them in a mess tin. You can always tell Wittmann's grave because it's surrounded by flowers. Since the war, Wittmann has become legendary. There are websites dedicated to him. And this is all very nice, but we should not forget what he fought for. Sometimes we have a tendency to romanticize these people when they're really fighting for Adolf Hitler. This is Wittmann's collective grave here, and this is where his partial remains were put in 1983. They had a large ceremony, and Wittmann's widow came to it, and they honored him, and they continue to honor him. Michael Wittmann lived his life on the edge. He became famous because of his willingness to take risks, to take advantage of opportunities. But for him to make that charge towards the Canadians on Hill 112 was suicide.
I have a feeling that Wittmann had been in the war so long that when it got to that point, they were realizing that the war was lost. And whether his last thoughts as he went down the road were simply, Valhalla, here I come.
the Sherbrouks did knock out Michael Wittmann. And you didn't make very much of it. None of us knew who the hell this guy was.
He accepted the doctrines of Hitler enough to get in his tank and invade other people's countries, left country after country. Anybody who goes into another person's country to kill is a criminal. I'm afraid he might have been a hero to the Germans, but not to me.
This is Grand Harbor, Malta, and today it's a popular tourist resort, but in the Second World War, it was the most important harbor on the Eastern Mediterranean. And it was so important that the Germans had to control it, or they would lose the war in North Africa. And to do that, they employed siege techniques, starve out the population, and to bomb them into submission. Malta became the most bombed place on Earth. We've come back to Malta to tell the story of the Great Siege, one of the most important battles of the Second World War. We want to look into the people who are here, the civilians, the gunners, the Navy and the Merchant Navy, and of course the legendary fighter pilots who won the Siege of Malta. This is Republic Street in Valletta, and it's the most popular tourist destination. The tourists come to Malta for a lot of reasons. One is to buy stuff from the shops, the great tourist trinkets. The other is for the sun and to party. But Malta also has an incredible history that goes back over 6,000 years. In fact, there are ruins from 3600 BC. This is a ruin from a more modern time. This is not a Roman ruin. This is what's left of the Valletta Opera House. It was carpet bombed by the Germans in April 1942, and much of Malta was like this. This was a beautiful building. Here you can see what's left of one of the columns from the Grand Opera House. You can see where the bombs or shrapnel, really fragments from the bomb, would have taken off a piece of it. And this is really a symbol of what happened to Malta during the Second World War. The most severe raids took place in 1942, but the first one came over with the Italians on June 11th, 1940.
In the late spring of 1940, the tiny island of Malta is a quiet British outpost in the middle of the Mediterranean, far from the war raging in Western Europe. But with the entry of Italy and its colonies into the conflict on June 10th, Malta becomes a principal target for the Italian Air Force. The island now lies at the heart of a vast Axis empire. To the south, some 250,000 Italian and colonial troops are within striking distance of the oil fields of the Middle East, oil that could fuel the Axis war machine for years to come. Seeing Malta as a threat against their Mediterranean supply lines, Italy unleashes its formidable air force in a bombing campaign against the island. With only 4,000 troops and no fighter aircraft to speak of, Malta is all but written off by Allied command. Now the island's last remaining hope lies with a small force of anti-aircraft gunners.
I'm with Major Maurice Ejus of the Royal Malta Artillery, and this is one of his gun emplacements during the Great Battle for Malta. So I want you to explain to me how you laid out your battery.
Yes, well, we had a command post over there.
Right.
And 4 guns, starting from number 1 on the left, number 2 gun, number 3 gun, and number 4 gun.
Here, this is where the gun would have been.
That's right, yes. It used to be stuck to the ground by means of nuts and bolts. It was a 3.7-inch heavy attack gun. The shell was 28 pounds, 28.5 pounds. And the cartridge was about that high.
Your objective was to shoot down and harass.
That's right. The Italians, they used to come at 23,000, 25,000 feet and never changed direction, never changed height, and never changed speed. And as soon as you see a sparkle in the sky, and you say, it's plane! Hey! But when they get too close and they start a deeper dive, then you can't fire anymore. And the operations room used to order barrage 6,000 feet. Each gun position is given an area in the sky to shoot at.
This strategy, known as the box barrage, forces attacking bombers to ascend to higher altitudes over the intended target, hindering their ability to bomb accurately. As planes approach, anti-aircraft units unleash sustained barrages at predetermined angles, creating a box of withering fire that will blast any aircraft attempting to fly through from the sky.
And one plane is shot down. Then you get another half a minute or so, and a second plane comes. And occasionally, you know, all 5 were shot down. At the early months, it was the gunners who actually saved Malta.
The defenders managed to hold out through the midsummer of 1940. Hoping to capitalize on their success, the Allies send 24 Hurricane fighters to Malta, along with experienced pilots from all over the Commonwealth, who quickly chase the Italian bombers from the island's skies. It's the first of 2 devastating setbacks for Italy in the latter half of 1940. In December, the Italian 10th Army is defeated in Egypt by a much smaller British force. By the end of the year, the Axis is in real danger of losing its foothold in Africa. The Allies are on the offensive at last. But for Malta, this new optimism will be short-lived.
After the initial attacks by the Italians in June 1940, things went pretty quiet in Malta. A lot of the people returned to their homes, and war didn't seem to be such a bad thing after all. But in North Africa, things were changing. The Italians were failing miserably against the British, and now the Germans were to step in. So once again, Malta was going to be a target, this time for the German Luftwaffe.
January 1941, a small British-led force on the tiny Mediterranean island of Malta is held out against 6 months of attacks by Italian bombers. With Malta's skies clear, the Allies begin using the island as a base to attack Axis supply shipping bound for North Africa. Fearing a total loss of Axis holdings in North Africa, the Germans dispatched General Erwin Rommel to regain control of the situation. But if Rommel is to defeat the Allies in the desert, Axis supply routes across the Mediterranean must remain open. In January, the Axis resumes its bombing of Malta, this time under German command. Their mission is to bring Malta to its knees. Among the civilians seeking shelter from the bombardment is Joseph Attard.
I'll have to go down slowly,
Yeah, go down slow.
because I'm not steady on my legs.
So,
Yeah.
tell me how things changed in January 1941.
Well, a good amount of the bombs dropped on this place here. That was blown down to the ground. All this building. We had 40 people blocked down there, trapped, because there is the crypt down there, and it was used as a shelter. I came here, and I went through the church, and from there was the beginning of the rubble. But we couldn't get onto them. For a couple of days, we could hear the moaning. There were some of them who were still alive. And tears come into my eyes. I was so close to them, and yet so far. We found the baby, which was still alive. I pulled it out together with the others, and that was the only person we saved from there. The others were all dead. Those are the names of the people who were trapped and killed here. I can see their names now. But most of them I know personally, those people. Now, one I know, for example, let me say her name. Chettina. Now, Chettina was a young girl of my own age. She had very good looks. Who was carrying the baby I saved. It was not my baby. Yes. Chetta. Well, I remember Chetta.
Through early 1941, the bombing campaign intensifies. But in May, Malta is granted a reprieve when the Luftwaffe force attacking the island is reassigned to the Eastern Front. The Allies take full advantage, resuming their raids on Axis supply lines to North Africa. By the end of 1941, they are inflicting 80% losses on Axis shipping. But in December, with Rommel in full retreat, the Luftwaffe is ordered back to the Mediterranean with orders to destroy Malta's defense force in advance of a planned invasion. And this time, the Germans have a new weapon, the high-speed Me-109F. These new fighters easily outmatch the Allies' Hurricanes, which are shot out of the sky in alarming numbers.
This is the city of Rabat, and a lot of the RAF pilots were billeted here, and this is where they found their entertainments. February and March 1942 were terrible months for the fighter pilots. Their Hurricanes were grossly outnumbered by the Luftwaffe, and the Me-109F, the modified fighter, was just too much for the Hurricanes. So Buck McNair, the Canadian ace, decided to take some of the pilots of 249 Squadron out for relaxation. So on the night of March 21st, 1942, they went down to the theater to watch a film. In the middle of the film, the air raid siren went off. They decided to leave, and they had to come along this street, hiding in each doorway just to be safe from the bombing. When they finally got to this point, they're going to go over to the Point de Vue, which was the officers' mess, for a stiff drink. And as they went through this door, they started to approach it, and all of a sudden, bang! A bomb went off. When McNair awoke, he was on the second floor and didn't know what happened. And when he made his way down, he found the bodies of his friends.
The building still shows a lot of damage from the one bomb. You can see holes here, all along the wall, even on the ceiling. In March and April 1942, no place was safe in Malta. The Germans were literally neutralizing it. They're bombing everywhere and everything in their preparations for the invasion.
The Germans attack the island day and night, bombing harbors, airfields, and civilian targets. Malta's cities and towns are reduced to rubble, forcing virtually the entire population to seek refuge underground.
This is one of the communal bomb shelters in Vittorioso in Malta. And this is where the whole population of Malta would live, or at least they'd live underground. You can see that this is all limestone, and it's all hand-chiseled. Here are the pick marks up here. And the advantage to the Maltese is that their whole island is a limestone rock, which is quite soft. That meant they could dig in. So when the Germans bombed, the whole population went underground. This shelter is about 150 feet underground because it's built into the ramparts of an old fort. And you can see here, this is the sleeping quarters, and you can imagine how cramped the conditions would be and how stale the air. Personally, I don't like small places. I don't know how long I'd last, but I'd much rather be under here than having to face the bombs. These little holes are very well-planned ventilation shafts. And of course, they'd have to drill them all the way through to the top to get some fresh air because the air down here would be totally stale. Even now, with just a couple people around, you can tell it wouldn't be very comfortable. And if you had a whole bunch of people, families, hundreds of people here, they probably couldn't wait to go upstairs. But during April 1942, the Germans were bombing so often, every few hours, that they had to stay down here almost 24 hours a day. They didn't realize it, but the Germans had dubbed Malta the Hornet's Nest, and now they were going to smoke it out. To do this, they brought 600 aircraft, including 300 fighters. Now, the people could stay underground, and they'd be protected from the bombs, but that wouldn't save Malta. Malta needed a new fighter. They needed Spitfires.
April 1942. The Mediterranean island of Malta is under constant attack by the Luftwaffe. Speedy Me-109F fighters have overwhelmed the island's force of Hurricanes, opening shipping lanes to resupply Rommel's Africa Corps, and allowing bombers to release their payloads on the island with little or no opposition. With a few pilots still flying in Malta's defense, death seems only a matter of time as the Luftwaffe hounds them relentlessly.
This is the Cali airfield, and during the Second World War, this was one of the most important fighter bases for the defense of Malta. And now, the only airport that this serves is for the model airplane guys, and you can hear their engines going and flying around here. This was the original base of the Hurricanes 249 Squadron in May 1941, and this was the centerpiece for the defense of Malta. And of course, the Germans knew this, and it was constantly strafed and bombed. They come over 6, 7, 8 times a day with 100 bombers, and they just pound the hell out of this place. And by the spring of 42, there's only half a dozen serviceable Hurricanes in operation, and they were no match for the Messerschmitts. They had been upgraded. So the only way Malta was going to survive was to bring in Spitfires, and a lot of them.
But delivering the fighters to Malta poses a significant problem. Gibraltar, the nearest British airbase, is 1,200 miles to the west, well beyond the Spitfire's range. The solution is simple but risky. The Allies load the fighters onto aircraft carriers and sail them to within 700 miles of Malta. From there, pilots take off and run a terrifying gauntlet of prowling Me-109s, hoping to reach Malta before running out of fuel.
I'm here with Ian McLennan, who flew Spitfires in the defense of Malta. He arrived in July 1942, and he shot down 7 aircraft and was a Malta ace. So within landing, even 24 hours, you saw your first German airplanes?
Oh, well, when we were landing, there were Germans all over the place. Of course, it was being strafed and bombed. And you could just see, I'd never seen it in my life before. 109's coming right at you, and the guns flaring. 88s are dropping bombs around. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. It was a hectic time, you know what I mean? There was no time to be scared. You just, what you were doing, get your Spitfire down. And then running, someone would wave at you and you'd run and get down into cover.
So this was the old Tocali runway.
Right.
And of course, it would have been grassed?
No, there was nothing like this. It was just a grass drone. And they kept it. Now, it was always being mended because they were trying always to kill the airfields. The trick was to stay alive.
So once the Spitfires came in down here, they'd be pulled off into a splinter pen. They'd be refueled, rearmed. The pilot would get out, a fresh pilot would get in and go up and join the melee.
Yeah, sure. But the ideal thing was to get up to around 30,000 feet, hanging on your props, waiting for the bounce. So they're coming at you from Sicily, and you're sitting in the sun, and they can't see you. You see these tiny little specks. And maybe there'd be 40 Junkers 88s, and maybe 30, 40, 50 109s. You made sure you gave your guys the best chance for the first bounce, and down we go at them. Saw somebody in trouble, somebody coming up the ass, you would say, break. And if you didn't know who it was, you'd say, break, and everybody broke. I remember once getting bounced, so I just went into a spin and let my aircraft spin all the way down. Obviously, I was shot down. And then when I got right down the water, and the battle's up there, then I pulled it out.
So you played dead?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I can remember. I remember the first time I did that, thinking this is very bright because I got away with it. I think the guy. I'm sure he went back and said, "I got this guy." He went into the sea. He's dead. The trick was to get up close, give him a bit of a lead, and if you were flying right behind him, slightly above, coming down.
126 Spitfires that reach Malta have an immediate impact on the island's dire situation. Daylight bombing raids on the island are drastically reduced. And despite being outnumbered nearly 2 to 1, the Spitfires downed 207 enemy aircraft in their first 2 months of action alone.
The aircraft that made the difference in the battle for Malta was the Spitfire. And this is an example here.
A most graceful, it's one of the most beautiful aircraft, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's a wonderful design.
Well, these are the things that did the greatest damage. This is a 20 millimeter and a SAPI ammunition, semi-armor piercing incendiary explosive. So it would go through steel, burst everything. These are the things that blew things apart. The machine guns didn't do as much damage, but mind you, they could kill. You have 20 seconds, 30 seconds firing, so that means you learn to nurse it. Because once you're out of ammunition, you're very vulnerable. You're nothing, obviously, but still, you then have to get out of the fight. These are 20-millimeter shells, and it is armor-piercing, and it's explosive, so it's a very deadly weapon going into another aircraft. Whereas machine guns just go through, and if it hits you, you're dead, or if it hits something vital, it's dead. But these things do a lot of damage. Blow controls away and all that sort of thing. The wing will come off, a tail will come off. It's just devastating. Whoop. Thanks. Okay, you guys, chalks away. It looks familiar. Really familiar. Well, this is the joystick. This is the firing machine. This is, you push that, you get machine guns. Press that, you get everything. Cannons and machine guns. There's one thing here which is for emergency. If you're facing death and you can't get away from some guy and you need power, you take this thing and you push it forward. And it adds water to the gas and gives this engine tremendous power and boost. You have to look over this boost thing. There it is. And you couldn't leave it on for more than a few seconds or the engine would burst, would disintegrate. I remember several times looking at it, flirting with the idea I'm going to use this bloody boost if I don't get out of this fairly quickly. And I think I did it once, but you really didn't want to do it. And I think if I did it, I probably did that. And then did that. And I got away.
But are you proud to have served on Malta, to have fought on Malta?
Proud? I guess so, yes. I'm not ashamed of it. You know, yeah, I'm... Yeah, well, there were a lot of guys like me, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Despite the best efforts of the newly arrived pilots, Malta's fate still hangs in the balance. In June, 2 supply convoys set out for the island, but Axis forces still control the surrounding sea and skies. Even with heavy escort, only 2 Allied ships managed to arrive safely. By midsummer, with no further relief on the horizon, the island is on the brink of capitulation. The population is down to its last rations and will not be able to hold out through fall. The pilots, too, are feeling the strain, plagued by poor food and extreme lack of sleep.
They were stressful, tiring times. You get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and you're on service till dark. And that might go on for 3 or 4 days. Quite exhausting. I think everybody was hungry all the time, somehow. And the Maltese people were practically starving. And every now and then you'd get ill, you'd have Malta dog, or they call it dysentery and that kind of stuff. Everything seemed to be bombed, you know what I mean? Rubble was everywhere. They're cleaning up the rubble and people are walking through, and it stays that way perhaps for months. So it was walking through a beleaguered city full of ruin. And there were air raid shelters down underneath all this limestone, stairs and everything going down. And I remember on one occasion, I started for it, and then I saw a woman sort of running towards it. And I didn't like feeling it. I think she was terrified. And I thought, she's going to hurt herself. So I started to try to cut her off to reassure her and slow her down. But I missed her, and down she went. And when I went down, she was dead. So, you know, distressing. Very distressing.
This was happening all over Malta.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Every day. It was a bad time.
August 1942. The war for North Africa enters its climactic phase. The Allies have stopped the advance of Rommel's Afrika Korps at the First Battle of El Alamein, a victory due in great part to Malta-based attacks on Axis supply ships. For the Germans, the situation is now clear. If they hope for a victory in North Africa, it is imperative they eliminate the threat from Malta, once and for all. In the late summer of 1942, dogfights between Spitfires and Me-109s rage over the island, as the Luftwaffe attempts to wear down the outnumbered Allied defenders.
This is the Chara Palace in Medina, and now it's a five-star hotel, but in 1942, it was an officer's mess for 249 Squadron, as well as one or two other fighter squadrons that served at Takali Airfield. And of course, from this position, you can see Takali Airfield just over here, and the pilots who weren't flying could get an excellent view of the dogfights that would go on. So you'd watch the dogfights, so on your day off?
From time to time, yes. You know, you can imagine they're way up there, they're high, and it's fascinating. It's like a small opera, but you can't tell who's who, really. But it can change suddenly. Dogfights varied. There could be 6 Spitfires going after 3 109s strafing right in front of you, under 2,000 feet. Almost you could touch them, you're scared. Guns are blazing or are about to blaze. So it's quite dangerous, and you can hear the bangs and the crashes.
Malta had a lot of great fighter aces, and of course, George Burling was at the top of the list. What made him different?
Well, that he was a phenomenal fighter pilot. Oh, yeah. You didn't argue about it. The guy was coming down with kills all the time. Nobody else could match it. Nobody. And there were some great fighter pilots in Malta. Burling had great eyesight. You know, the little specks. My whole life at that time was little specks. Every time you went up and you were called, you looked towards Sicily for the little specks.
I scrambled to take on 2 Junker 88s, escorted by about 20 Me-109s. 2 MEs got the drop on me. I did a quick wing over and got onto one's tail. He saw me coming and tried to climb away. I figured he must have been about 800 yards away from me when I got him into my sights.
At this distance, Burling is engaged in a war of invisible numbers. His Spitfire is traveling at 250 miles per hour, while the Me-109 is climbing at a rate of over 50 feet per second. The equation grows even more complicated when he factors in the velocity of his weapons. In essence, Burling must not shoot directly at his enemy, rather at a point in space where his enemy and his fire will precisely meet.
I gave him a 3-second burst, smack onto his starboard flank, and got him in the tank. It was a full deflection shot.
He was a pilot who was better than anybody else. He would have been difficult to handle in the squadron because he's so bloody bright and knows what he's got to be doing. And he's better at it than anybody else on the squadron. And he knows it, and they know it, which is not an endearing trait. You know, to be better than everybody else. He didn't have the freedom he needed. He was frustrated. That's the problem. And that made him a troubled guy and a trouble to anybody who had to handle him, I'm sure. But he could have been handled if somebody took the mind to say, look, we've got ourselves an ace here.
By August, Burling was already a legend in Malta. He had 15 kills. He had at least half a dozen probables and damaged. He was the #1 fighter pilot on Malta. But every pilot knew at some point his number could come up. On August 8th, 1942, Burling's number came up.
A bunch of yellow-nosed Me-109s were waiting for us, and every mother's son of them stayed to fight. I quickly turned to get under one of them and gave him a 2.5-second burst. I hadn't any more than begun to dive when I I got mine.
We're trying to find Buzz Burling's crash site of August 8th, 1942. The passage of time makes examining any battlefield difficult. Of course, specifically, exactly where it took place in the field, well, that's another story. Then you need an eyewitness. This is the village of Guja, and it's near Lucca Airport, and we think we found somebody who witnessed the Burling crash. This is quite amazing, considering how few people would have seen it in the first place. So I'm going to talk to him. Hello, Joseph. Hi.
How are you? What you got for it?
I came to find out about the Buzz Burling crash site. You're the eyewitness we're looking for. So, Giuseppe, what did you see when the Spitfire came down? So he's maneuverable, and he's coming into the ground, close to the ground. Where did the plane crash?
Between village and Tarishan.
We're just on the outskirts of Guja, and we're going to try to find out where Burling came down in his famous and very lucky crash on August 8, 1942. They were chasing after a gaggle of Germans over in this area. They were going after Grand Harbor. And just somewhere to the east over there in the sky, a dogfight developed. Now, Burling had already had 15 kills. He went in, and with some very fine deflection shooting, he had his 16th. The Me-109 went down. The problem was somebody got him, and he got hit in the engine, and his engine cut out and died, and he's stuck in the middle of a dogfight with no engine.
The old Merlin wouldn't give me any more than 160 miles an hour and was heating up fast. The Spit was sinking slowly. It had begun to look like a bailing job.
By the time he gets his harness all set, he's down to 200 feet. He's got to be going about 100 miles an hour. He came down gradually by that church over there.
Right ahead, I could see a nice plowed field, about an acre in size, surrounded by low stone walls.
Now, the danger here is all these stone walls. If a Spitfire hits one at 100 miles an hour, you're a dead man.
I slithered along, cutting the glide fine, but not too fine. It's damned easy to flip these spits and spit in. Gotta try to keep that nose high.
Burling's Spitfire came across this field, makes a belly landing, and just as it's about to hit the wall, he tips the wing down, and it stops cold. Climbs out of the cockpit, inspects the plane. He had nothing but a cut. He'd escaped his first dangerous clash with death. He'd lived to fight another day.
But struggle as they may, fighters alone cannot save Malta. The island is nearly out of food, fuel, and ammunition. In August, the Allies launch one last effort at resupply. This convoy must reach Malta, or all efforts to defend the tiny island will have been in vain.
By the end of July 1942, Malta was in dire straits. The Spitfires had alleviated the attacks on the island, but it was simply rubble. They had bombed everything into oblivion. And Now the people were starving. They had no ammunition, and their fuel was low. They knew that the only way to survive was a do-or-die convoy, and it was codenamed Operation Pedestal, and it left England in early August 1942.
Tensions run high on both sides as the convoy enters the Mediterranean. The Germans know that if they are to conquer North Africa, they must force Malta to surrender. The intercept force lies in wait until the Allied convoy enters the strait between Tunisia and Sicily. There they attack. One by one, the ships of Operation Pedestal are sent to the bottom. But the ultimate prize for Axis gunners is the tanker Ohio, bearing precious fuel for Malta's aircraft. The lightly armed ship struggles forward under murderous fire.
Within a week, we would have surrendered, definitely. We were in our last days before extinction. Everybody knew. We had no rations, no ammunition. Petrol had almost finished. No fighters could go up without petrol. If there is no tanker, we shall be lost. The important one was the tanker.
So really, this is the end.
Yes, it was the end. That was definitely the end. There was a week, just a week supplies. We were just hoping that something comes down from heaven. That's why we call the arrival of the convoy, of the Santa Maria convoy, as a miracle. They were praying in churches to Santa Maria to do something, to let something to save Malta. We heard gunfire when it was attacked near Sicily. There was a warning sounded, a red warning, and the people, some of them, found the shelter. But there were those who remained still here. It appeared between the two lighthouses there, being cradled on two cables held by two destroyers. And of course there was the superstructure, all mangled with the bombs and the torpedo. Then everybody followed the Ohio until it went there. And they started immediately piping the oils out. There was joy all around, clapping. It was moving. I think it was the most moving sight in the whole war for us.
After the Ohio, things quietened down in Malta. In fact, the Germans didn't come back until October 10th. That's when they brought all their bombers back, and they were going to punish Malta once again. But this time, the Spits were waiting for them, and they shot them down by the dozen. In 5 days, Berling added 8 to his total. But of course, that was his last battle of the war. He was shot down and injured and never flew again over Malta. Ian McLennan added 5 to his tally, including 2 Junkers in one day. But the real changes were taking place in North Africa. On October 23rd,
the 8th Army attacked Rommel's Africa Corps and started driving them back towards Tunisia. In November, the Americans landed in North Africa and they started a pincher movement, and basically the war in North Africa was over. It was just a matter of time. After 2.5 years of aerial bombardments, the siege of Malta was over. This is Cappuccini Naval Cemetery, south of Grand Harbor. And it was used by the British for more than 100 years. And there are 700 Second World War burials here. You can see how they're laid out, that the men are buried in crypts, in really a collective grave in a crypt. Then a large slab is put over top, and the details of the burials on top, with the cap badge of the associated unit. It also is, in many ways, the history of the Malta campaign. Buried in this crypt, there are 4 of the men killed at the bombing at Pont de Vue. And you can see here Baker, Guerin, the Australian, Hollis Hallett, and Waterfield were all killed in the doorway of the hotel. This one here, Pilot Officer Doug Lago, was shot down on the 20th of March, 1942, and his situation is quite infamous. He actually parachuted out of his plane. The German went over and machine gunned his canopy. So the parachute collapsed and Lago fell to his death. "7,000 people died in the defense of Malta, and by Second World War standards, that's a small number for such a decisive victory. All great campaigns are made up of a few mistakes, a few myths, and a few miracles, and Malta was no different. But really, it was the courage and tenacity of all the people who were here that saved the day, whether they be civilians, dock workers, gunners, merchant navy, Royal Navy, or Air Force. And it's really to these people that we should remember that they changed the course of the Second World War.